I grew up as an only child in a small house in the Hollywood Hills, before housing prices in the neighborhood skyrocketed. My parents were not the helicoptering type, perhaps because they themselves grew up in a small, safe town in the Midwest in the 1950s and 60s. I spent my childhood roaming the neighborhood, in the hills, playing imaginary little stories through my head. I had a couple of local friends over the years, but generally there were no kids in our neighborhood. It wasn't a place to raise children. It wasn't a great part of Hollywood at the time, and the 101 freeway was quite literally in our backyard. Most of the streets were unpaved, and there were no sidewalks. Mostly it was populated with aging hippie types and struggling actors, so 90% of the time, I played and wandered alone. One day, my mother picked me up from school and we headed home. Once through the door, we did the usual. Kicked our shoes off, shouldered off school and work bags, greeted the cats, and attended to the blinking red light on the answering machine. I think I so vividly remember our usual little routine that day because what cut through it was so unusual and unsettling and rang in such sharp contrast to the comfortable little world I'd always felt so safe within. I was maybe 8 or 9 at the time, and this was definitely a moment of innocence lost. There was only one message. A man's voice, grinning, invaded the little house. I would love so much to scare your daughter. Then he laughed, maniacal sounding and exaggerated. It would have sounded like the guffaw of a villain in some movie, but it didn't, despite the obvious theatrics. It didn't sound that way, because it was real. It was far scarier than any fiction. The laughter was loud, long, and drawn out. I didn't even hear the end of it. My mom hit stop on the player, cutting him off abruptly, but his presence still hung heavily in the air. My little world had been irrevocably disturbed. I remember my mother playing it off very casually, telling me that it was nothing, and that I shouldn't be afraid. I don't recall how shocking her composure was. How was that nothing? Shouldn't I be afraid? Why wasn't she afraid? Looking back now, I realized she was putting up a front for my benefit. Whenever I've brought this up to her now as an adult, she seems to sort of vaguely remember it and goes, "Oh, yeah. I don't know what that was. Just someone playing a prank." I'm shocked, honestly, that my parents didn't go to the police with it. That's not what I would consider a prank. To this day, I think my mom is still trying to downplay it. She grows uncomfortable when I bring it up. Anyway, after that incident, I could never really fully enjoy myself when I was out in the neighborhood by myself. I always wondered if that man was somewhere in the hills, watching. So a few nights ago, I received a call from a buddy of mine, asking if I could give him a ride to an event, then pick him up an hour or so later. I didn't have much to do that night, and he offered me $40, so I obliged. Around 8 p.m. my friend and I were in the car and on the way to said event. That night it was pouring rain, and there was a ton of traffic because of the event, so I had to pay extra attention to the road. At 8:30 we pull up to the place, my buddy gets out, and I drive on. Now the place I took him was about 30 minutes away from my house, so it made more sense to stay in the area rather than drive all the way home, then all the way back. I turned on my music and started driving around looking for a place to park my car and chill at. I was in a brand new luxury car which had a sweet sound system with Bluetooth that I could hook up to. I didn't want to wreck trying to connect it, so I pulled off into a vacant gas station so I could get everything connected. This is where I went wrong, because not only had I entered a vacant lot at night, but I was in a bad area, and I was all by myself. Being oblivious, as I sometimes am, I didn't realize the dangerous situation I was putting myself in. So la-di-da-da, I'm sitting there connecting the Bluetooth, when for whatever reason, I decide to look up. As I glanced up, I see an old white BMW pull into the parking lot rather quickly, then stop in the middle of the lot directly in front of me. There were 2 black males, and 1 white female. Weird. My guard is up now, but I wait to see what they do. Then all of a sudden the black dude in the passenger seat flings his door open, and I shit you not, starts running at my car. Oh shit, I thought to myself. The look this man gave me was fucking horrifying. I can only explain it as a look you would give someone that you have 100% intent to kill. My heart dropped, and so did my foot, onto the gas pedal. I pulled out of the parking lot, and into the far lane of the street. I glanced back briefly and saw that the dude, and now the female too, were running towards my car, which I'd stopped at the stoplight. So I hit the gas again, and got the fuck out of there, weaving through the back roads, running red lights, and finally making my way to the highway. I'm pretty sure this group saw me sitting all alone in the gas station parking lot in a $100,000 car, and saw me as an easy carjacking. Thank God I noticed them before they were able to pull me out of the car and do God knows what to me, before pulling off in my car. For a couple of minutes I was kind of shaken up, mainly because I thought they may have tried to follow me. But then I cooled down, and just learned from what happened. I also called my father and asked him if he would get me a handgun. So, strangers from that closed down marathon, let's not meet again. My story started 4 years ago, and is still kinda happening. Lucas was, or still is, the bus driver who drove the kids from my village to school next town, every day. He was always the nice bus driver, as there was a grumpy and moody one who sometimes switched shifts with him. A lot of people thought he was cool, great with kids, and always polite. I was 17 when there was some heavy rain in the afternoon, when I was on my way home, and when I arrived at the station in town, Lucas was already there, making a break in his bus. As he noticed me, he let me in the bus and we started a conversation. I felt uncomfortable first, but he was good at talking, so the weird feeling was gone soon. At one point, he asked me about my then ex-boyfriend. He saw us together and the two of them used to talk when he was still in school. He was 21 at the time, already working. I told him that we broke up, and that it was for the better. Then we continued talking about school. We started to talk every now and then, and after a while, he asked me for my phone number, so I could maybe text him if I'm late for the bus, or if I needed a ride in general. I found out that he was married, had 3 kids. He claimed to be 33, but later said he was over 40. I never really found out how old he actually was. The day after we exchanged numbers, he texted me that he was going to take a bath, and said that there would be enough space for 2, and if I liked massages. I replied that he should ask his wife about that, and he then said, "She is out of town, so I'm pretty lonely." We left it at that. One time, like 2 weeks later, I saw him and a young girl on the bus during his break, making out. I sent him a message, telling him that's not the way a married man should talk to younger girls. He replied that he'd explain to me later. His wife didn't want to have sex with him since the birth of his 3rd child. He needs sex on a daily basis. He loves her and would never want to hurt her. That's why I need to keep it a secret. Or do you want me to suffer? He has multiple young girls, all around my age. When I asked him why he wouldn't look for someone closer to his age, he replied, "Girl, you don't know where to find the honey. Girls your age need a proper man, someone who can give it to them. Boys that age are no good, but girls are so sweet." We then talked about my ex, who he said was a nice guy. He wasn't, but that's another story. Book could have never made me happy. I was a rebellious, moody teen, so I actually never listened to adults, but some things he told me made me think. I couldn't get out of my head. I started to believe the twisted things he said to me. I thought he was in the right, and it would be better for his marriage if he would have little girlfriends. The next day, I had school until the evening. I had to take the last bus back home, and because my sleeping schedule was terrible, I used to sleep in the afternoon and did homework all night. I fell asleep in the bus. I woke up when the bus was already empty, Lucas standing next to my seat. It was already dark outside, so I had no idea where we were. He sat down, started talking, and kissed me at some point. I asked him to stop, and that I wasn't here to become one of his girlfriends, but he just asked, "Then why did you stay in the bus? You were really mean. I can't tell someone else for you. You don't want me to be sad, do you?" And for some stupid reason, I believed him. He was the adult. He was in the right. We had sex because he made me feel guilty. I felt terrible afterwards and wanted to stop contact. But he was the one who brought me to school every day, so it was difficult to avoid him. The entire thing went on for months, making him making me feel guilty, giving me compliments and making me feel worthless at the same time. Showering me in the presents, and telling me that he invested so much money in me, and it would be rude to say no to him because of that. He wants me. I'm the best he ever had. I'm not allowed to leave. The time I managed to get out of the situation is because of my cat. When I tried to sneak back into my house, she started meowing and my parents woke up, took my phone and found the not yet deleted messages from him, asking me to go out in the night. They were furious. I was angry and tried to defend him. I did not want him to get in trouble. They made me change my number, and ran through the phone calls I made, checking that his number wouldn't show up again. I met him again. He forced me to give him my new number, and he texted me with a different one. My father noticed the amount of text to a new number, but believed me that it was for a school project. I asked Lucas to stop. That is too dangerous. I met my new boyfriend a few weeks after that, and managed to end things with Lucas, for now. I changed my number again, but he got it somehow, probably from my ex. I changed them again. A few weeks later I saw his car in my neighborhood. He did not know where I lived exactly, but he was pretty close to my home. I managed to hide myself. Later, I got a text that he was in my village, hoping to see me. He somehow got my number again. I changed them one last time, and it suddenly stopped. I thought that would be it. Fast forward to May last year. I'm 21, have a different boyfriend who happened to live close to Lucas's home. One day, he saw me. He texted me again, telling me the same things he did all the time. I was scared. I had no idea how he managed to get my number again. Must have been my ex who happened to be in the same theater group, but I never actually gave him my number, so he probably asked around and then told Lucas. My boyfriend noticed my reaction, and I finally told someone the whole story. He couldn't understand how I could still defend Lucas. His manipulation was pretty good. I almost gave in and agreed to meet Lucas, but my boyfriend managed to get through my mind, and I calmed down. The next days, I saw his car in my village a few times, received texts from him, and somehow managed to tell him to leave me alone. I moved to another town and blocked him everywhere. It's been since June 2016 that I last heard of him, and I am in therapy now. So I hope it's the end of the story, and I will never see him again. I recently drove from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to Buffalo, New York with my cat. The ride was long, but we were making decent time for the most part. She and I had gotten up toward right before you get into New York. It was around 5:30 p.m., but that also meant it was around pitch blackout too. We had only stopped once to get something at McDonald's, and I drank their iced tea quickly to try to stay awake. I definitely had to pee. I didn't want to leave my cat in the car, so I put her leash on, and we walked into the gas station. I said, "Do you mind if we use the restroom here?" The man behind the counter said sure, and she and I entered into the bathroom. She sat on the counter while I did my thing. The store wasn't empty. There were some dudes around browsing for honey buns, tasty cake, and cheaper cigarettes than those in New York. There was a woman talking to counter guy up front. She was probably like a regular based on their seeming familiarity with each other. My cat jumped about a foot when we heard the doorknob rattle. I laughed and said, "Sorry, it's occupied right now." My cat is a trained animal. She is trained to handle people, stimulating situations, crowds, and relatively loud noise. She hates cars, though. I looked over at her after the jump, and her tail was as full as could be, and she got low and slipped up to her favorite position on my shoulders. She dug into my hair with her nails, and did her little grumble at me that she does when she wants to be let outside. The doorknob rattled again, and she reached out toward the door like in a quick way to strike. "It's still occupied," I called out, but I wasn't laughing this time. We then heard someone speak. It was a man's voice, and honestly, it kind of made my blood run cold. They were speaking a cousin of my native language. English is not my first language. They were saying, "Should I grab her when she comes out?" In my native tongue, grab doesn't really have the multiple connotations like it does in English. They used what was similar to take, as far as I could tell through the door. "No, the cashier is right there. We can go stand outside. I think her car is the blue one." My cat did her angry grumble bug sound, and I tried to pet her to reassure her. There weren't any windows in this bathroom, and my car was parked, unwisely, around the side of the lot. I parked it a little away from the lights because I had a lot of stuff in it, and I didn't want the items to be lit. It was not the blue one. We heard their steps retreat. We sat there for what felt like a long time. We both jumped when we heard a knock on the door. "Come out quickly. My girlfriend will lead you through the back to your car. They are standing out by the pumps." It was Counter Guy, and who I thought was the regular. I opened the door and she ushered me to the back. She opened the door and I could see my car about 20 feet away. I wanted to sprint, but I remember I used my key thing to set the alarm. I unlocked the car with my keys and the alarm went off. I threw myself into the driver's seat, unlocked it with the key thing, and quickly pressed the button to lock it again. I felt my heart in my throat as I threw the car into reverse and got the fuck out of there. On my way out, I noticed the guy standing near the blue car on the other side of the lot, trying to nonchalantly smoke. They didn't even know I got out. Weird persons? Let's not meet. First, let me set up some background to make the flow of the story smoother. I was barely 13 years old and I was being raised by my grandparents. They had problems with their two daughters as adults, my mother being the older of the two, and they wanted to do everything that they could to make sure that I didn't turn out the same way. A do-over, if you will. So needless to say, they were very strict. My aunt was having a good period and she had her shit together. We were all very close. My aunt understood what it was like to be raised under a glass dome, metaphorically speaking. So being as she was my only aunt, she made sure that the time we spent together was super cool. I would stay over Saturday nights. We would go out and hang out at the pier, and she would let me hang out with my middle school boyfriend, who would find ways to get to wherever I was. My grandparents had no idea of any of these activities, of course. I was just spending time with my aunt and giving them a break. It was nice that I had a younger female figure since my mom wasn't around. One night, when we were out having fun, my aunt meets this guy and they really hit it off. He was very nice and introduced himself to me. He went by JR, a kind and charming talker. They exchanged numbers after hanging out a while, and then we went home and went to bed. They ended up going out a bit more, and my aunt really liked JR. He took her to his home and introduced her to his father, and showed her around his land. He lived out in the woods in the middle of nowhere. I've lived in this town for 30 years, and I still to this day couldn't tell you where it is. I was only there once. He was teaching my aunt how to shoot a gun. I remember her shoulder rocking back with the impact of the shot, and it surprising her. He had these weird flamenco dancing clothes in his closet. It was all seemingly harmless. I mean, everyone has their quirks. About 10 days, maybe 2 weeks later, we were again at the pier, out by the payphones talking about what to do that night, and what to get for dinner. JR and my aunt were in their 20s, early 30s, and as much as she loved me, I imagine there were times that I got in the way. Well, anyway, we were at the pier and he's talking about how he has these painkillers. He offered me one. I declined, of course, and told him I had a high tolerance to pain anyway, and didn't need that stuff. He then, with a huge smile, asked me if he can see for himself, assuring me he won't really hurt me, he's just trying to have fun. This bastard twists my arm behind my back until I hear a pop. I start to cry and he laughs and says, "Aw, sweetheart, I was only playing. You said you had a high tolerance." I guess I was stronger than I thought I was being. I'm sorry, no need to ruin the good time we were all having. I go in the private pier office. Our granddad managed it, crying. My aunt comes in and lets me know that she thinks it's fucked up too, and that she would talk to him about it. Well, she goes back outside and he asks her what she is up to that night. She tells him that she isn't sure if I'm staying over because with what had just happened, I was whining about going home. I was pissed that she didn't deck him right there for hurting me. Well, he tells her that she should meet him under, let's call it the Sunset Bridge at 2 a.m. on the other side of town. He says that the stars are beautiful and you can listen and hear the fish. He tells her he would love to see it with her, and they can dance under the moon. We were all from a fishing family, and live in a fishing town, so fish activities under the bridge at late times wasn't necessarily something that threw up a red flag. If it's dark and late, there won't be people there hawking all the fish. She tells him maybe, and we leave. I decide to spend the night after all, later sneaking in only if she could pick up my boyfriend Charlie, playing up on guilt points. She calls him when she gets home, before we made our arrangement about Charlie, and calls him and says that she can come, but she will have me with her. He groans and gets all eye-rolly, sounding over the phone, and is like, "Fine, alright. I guess she can come too. Maybe she will get tired and sleep in the car." About an hour after she called him the first time I asked her about Charlie, and she agrees. She sits down with me, and hugs me and touches my face lovingly, apologizing for what had happened with my arm. She then calls him again, and tells him not to worry. She's picking up Charlie, so I'll have my own entertainment, and they can have their time. He goes into a rage and starts sputtering and cussing about how it's too complicated now. He just wanted an intimate meeting with her and not a damn family reunion. He went on about how he didn't want to have to babysit a 13-year-old kid and her 14-year-old boyfriend. He hangs up after calling her a crazy bitch. She bewilderingly hangs up the phone and tells me what happened. We go about our night with pizza rolls and PlayStation and things are fine. He calls her a few more times and drives by the house for a couple of weeks, but my aunt was having none of it. After a while, he left our lives just as swiftly as he came. The whole affair lasted only a month, if even that. 3 weeks maybe. And all in all, it wasn't the craziest experience she has had with a man. JR was soon forgotten, and we went about our business. Flash forward 2 years later, I'm in middle school. My aunt had moved to a city about 40 miles away. I still lived with my grandparents. They were still strict, but as they had gotten older, so had I. I knew a few ways around the rules. One day my friend Frank and I missed the bus home from school, and called our good high school friend Darla to pick us up, and take us home after riding a bit. She had this big, beautiful red truck, and I would ride around in the cab of it, loving the freedom and the wind. We were smoking cigarettes, laughing, listening to the radio. The time I was spent on the bus before my stop was just enough time to hit up the taco drive-thru and cruise down the road a bit, heading back to Frank and I's houses. We had a lot of fun that day. She dropped me off first, and my grandparents came outside heavily confused at the sight of an unknown vehicle, and ever more so that I had gotten out of it. After letting her explain because she was older, cooler, and more responsible, my parents thanked her for being kind enough to take me home. They said how lucky I was that she had just happened to be there to help me get home. The things we do to our parents, eh? That was the last time we ever saw my friend Darla. She didn't show up for work for 5 days. I can't speak for everyone, but I assume she had just ran away. Darla's parents were going through a nasty divorce. The dad had a hot new girlfriend, and the mother was very bitter about it. Rightfully so, I guess. It was embarrassing for all the kids. Her truck wasn't left behind. I figured she got tired of her parents acting like infants, and took off. I missed her, but she was in a whole other league of freedom and coolness. 16 is a whole different life than 15, especially when you're in different schools. I wished her well, maybe even a little envious that she got out of this town when I was still here. I hadn't heard anything for 2 weeks about her. When at about 9 p.m. at night, my grandparents got a phone call to turn on the news. Darla's body was found out of the woods. She had been strangled to death and just left out there. I don't even know for how long. I was devastated. I was so joyful that I had that last experience with her, but so saddened and horrified. She was so young, barely older than myself. She was about to be 17 in just a short time. It was a very sad time for our town. The good and bad news is that they caught the guy that had done it. He confessed after some very incriminating evidence, and during his questioning, also confessed to killing his girlfriend, who had been missing for about 4 years, and also his father, staging his death to look like a suicide by hanging. When they showed his mugshot on the screen and said his name, I swear I almost passed out. There, clear as day on the screen, staring back at me, was a picture of JR. I had no idea they even knew each other. I can't even imagine what would have happened if we had gone under the bridge that night. So JR, even though you're rotting in jail for eternity, please, let's not meet again. Ever. Hollowkeez here. How are you all doing today? I hope pretty fine. Unless my wish for you people to have your own paranormal experience came true. Did it? If not, hopefully it'll happen sometime. Well, it sure did feel nice going back to true stories again. Also, this is the first time I uploaded 2 videos so close to each other. I'm really trying here. It's quite a bit of effort, but I do enjoy it in the end. This is all rewarding in its own way. Anyway, we're getting close to a different kind of video soon. I only have 2 more scary stories videos to go before I upload it. I'll always do scary stories, by the way. I'm just going to be mixing other ideas in here too, as I believe it's for the best. I don't want this outro lasting too long, so I'll end it here. Make sure you like and subscribe if you like my voice, and if you like being scared. If it's fear you're after, welcome home.